Candace, can you open the window? I'm trying to film the thing.
If it fits!
Thank you. What if Dracula came back in the 20th century? That's the question Stephen King asked himself while teaching Dracula at Hampton Academy. He jokingly said about the idea, probably he'd land in New York and be killed by a taxicab like Margaret Mitchell in Atlanta. And then it was his wife who suggested the rural setting. Saving Carrie, the small town of Salem's Lot, Tabitha King is really doing the heavy lifting in this relationship so far. Also, Margaret Mitchell got hit by a car. I didn't know that. Also, while I was looking into it, I read that she's really into erotica. The more you know. And so King set about writing Salem's Lot, originally titled Second Coming, but again, Tabitha King swooping in to save the day and convincing Stephen that, so I had to talk in this.
You sound ridiculous.
I know it. Convincing Stephen that the title sounded too much like a bad sex story. Margaret Mitchell would have bought a copy. He changed the name to Jerusalem's Lot, but allegedly the publisher thought it sounded too religious, which is how we get Salem's Lot. And now, do we say Salem's Lot, or are we supposed to say Salem's Lot? Because I don't say Jerusalem, I say Jerusalem. Because if the town is abbreviating it, I imagine they started getting lazy with their language, or it's a byproduct of some weird northeastern drawl. Salem's Lot. Anyway, I bought the book and said, there's an apostrophe, and I've been thinking about it ever since. It's part of what makes this book so great, the little details, because I loved this book. This is a spoiler warning because I really, really do think that you should go into this book knowing as little as possible. Not that there are any huge twists and turns, but King does such a nice job at building this world and this town and the people in it. Let him do it. Don't let some jerk on the internet give you his half-assed estimation of it. I should cut out all the S's in the script. So go read the book and come back and like and subscribe. It tells the story of Ben Mears, an author returning to his hometown of Jerusalem's Lot to work on a book about the Marsten House, a dilapidated old house towering over the town that Ben had a traumatic experience with when he was a child. And then vampires. The real success of this novel is the time and care that King puts into developing this town and the people that live in it. There are over 50 named characters in this book, and while all of them aren't totally fleshed out, we're given enough so that they feel present and alive. The reader feels like they're a part of this small town where everyone knows everyone else's business. The relationship between Eva and Weasel, the abusive McDougal family, the nasty bus driver Charlie Rhodes. These are all separate individual storylines that King follows as if they're their own short stories. They could feel unnecessary tangents, or they could feel like an author world building for the sake of world building, but eventually it all pays off in the larger narrative when they start becoming vampires. Those relationships they had in life are often the reasons why they end up getting infected. Weasel infects Eva, the kids Charlie Rhodes would abuse on his school bus end up getting their revenge. I also really loved our core group of ragtag vampire hunters: Ben the author, Susan the small town girl with big dreams, Mark the horror aficionado, Matt the teacher, Jimmy the doctor, and Father Callahan. And now after Carrie, this is the only other Stephen King book I've ever read, and every time I go to read or watch someone talk about this book, they start to go off on these tangents about Father Callahan, and I'm not there yet. Stop talking about Father Callahan. I know he comes back. I guess he's awesome? I don't know yet. I'm still back in 1975. The six of them are like a microcosm of the town, a little eclectic group of people that you'd never expect to join forces, let alone to fight vampires. My tooth falling out. And what's really nice is their lack of plot armor. I was not expecting Susan to die, and if I'm being totally honest, I was expecting an Independence Day situation where they kill Barlow and that releases all the people that have been infected, and so when they drove a stake through Susan's heart and I realized that she was dead, I was pleasantly surprised. It really was nice to see the vampires win. My favorite scene in the book is pretty early on when Hank Peters and Royal Snow are unknowingly delivering Barlow's casket to the Marsten House. Nothing of note happens, just two guys picking up a heavy box and taking it into a basement, but the tension King manages to bring to that moment is terrific. I think because it draws on a pretty basic fear of walking into a dark room.
They separated. Hank went to the back door, his heart thudding heavily in his chest. He had to fumble twice to thread the locking arm through the hasp. This close to the house, the smell of age and wood rot was palpable. All those stories about Hubie Marston that they had laughed about as kids began to recur. and the chant they had chased the girls with. Watch out. Watch out. Watch out. Hubie'll get you if you don't watch out.
The film version of Salem's Lot, capital S, no apostrophe, was actually a television miniseries that aired on CBS on Saturday, November 17th and 24th, 1979. It was directed by the legendary horror director Tobe Hooper, who had released the classic Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a real hard one to say, 5 years earlier. It feels like a TV movie from the 70s, which I think mostly comes down to the fact that the camera is pretty static. There's a lot of reverse shot. The standout moment for me was when Barlow burst into Mark's home. That's the moment where I felt like we saw the Tobe Hooper from Texas Chainsaw. I don't think he did a bad job, but I think if more of the film had more moments like that, and I don't mean the dynamism, it feels like that moment had a lot of thought and care go into the filmmaking, and a lot of the rest feels like it's by the book adequate. We'd have a really classic horror film rather than a fun piece of nostalgia. And that's what this film feels like for me. It's kind of cozy, it's scary, but in a fun, borderline funny way. I think it's comparable to Cronenberg's The Brood, which came out the same year. I guess I just wanted more Alien, which also came out in 1979. But I'm probably asking too much for a TV movie. The cast is fine. I like the monstrous Barlow, but I also like him being able to communicate in the novel. My wish would be to split the difference. A man that has become this monster, but can still talk, mostly because I like the back and forth between him and Father Callahan in the book. I also think they did a fantastic job at adapting the novel, a very long novel, into a pretty tight 3-hour and 20-minute film. Like I said, the time and attention to the people of Salem's Lot is what makes the novel so great, and they do a really nice job of condensing those storylines and combining characters to recreate the feeling of being a part of the small town. You end up missing out on a lot, but in a book adaptation, you're going to. What they really needed was 5 more episodes, like the truest and best adaptation of Salem's Lot, Midnight Mass. I can't imagine if you've made it this far into a video about Salem's Lot, you don't at least know, if not have seen Midnight Mass. It is a fantastic 2021 Netflix series from Mike Flanagan. I'm kidding that it's a direct adaptation, and I don't even mean to imply it's ripping off King, but it is most definitely inspired by Salem's Lot. And if you somehow have not seen it and are a fan of this book, do yourself a favor and go watch it now. Before you ask, I have not seen the 2004 Rob Lowe version from TNT. I couldn't find it to stream anywhere from one of my many streaming services that I already subscribed to, and I just did not want to pay for it. They're allegedly making a feature film remake directed by Gary Dauberman, the writer of It, among other things, but it was supposed to be released this past September and was bumped to April 21st, 2023, but then was just bumped again to who knows when, so I don't know if that's ever happening. You can't rely on anything in the film business, but you can rely on the fact that I'll be making my way through Stephen King's books and films like I did when I watched Carrie. You can watch that video while you wait for me to finish reading The Shining. I'm done.